don't see these are obvious victories for us. Do you?
And I don't think they do either, actually. There's been a lot of where did it all go wrong in the years post-revolution. But in those early years, they were really jazzed up about this new internet social media superpower that they had deployed to topple those governments. And so they sought to do that in Cuba by creating what USAID called a Cuban Spring. And the problem was at that time, Cuba had banned U.S. social media companies, calling them, a tool of U.S. imperialism. And so there was no Twitter allowed. And so USAID pulled off this operation to create a company called Zunzaneo, which it was a Twitter knockoff. It had the same user interface. It had the same like and retweet button, and that was, I believe, like the Cuban slang word for hummingbird. So it was basically, it even had like the bird. And they knew that it couldn't be an American company, so they had to convince, I think it was 2 Cuban businessmen to set this up. And they ran it through USAID. What they did is they took humanitarian relief funds earmarked for Pakistan, and they ran it through a Byzantine labyrinth of shell companies and money laundered through Cayman banks and Panamanian banks and BVI banks, so that it got to these Cuban businessmen to set it up so that Cuban counterintelligence would not suspect that it was a U.S. thing. USAID contracted out to a group called Creative Associates International, CAI. It's not CIA, it's CAI, and they're very creative. And what the internal documents showed when this whole scandal blew up at USAID is that USAID's plan was to recruit about 100,000 Cubans onto this platform, luring them in with algorithms and vibes favoring sports, music, and hurricane updates were the main things. And then they said but at the same time, we're actually going to be taking all of their personal data on the back end, and we're going to be using AI for all the metadata and all the websites that they visit and all the cookies. And we're going to take that to aggregate a political receptivity map of the categories of users within these 100,000 that'll be most receptive to take to the streets in a violent revolution against the government. And what they plotted is that at the appropriate moment, once they had a critical mass of users on the platform, and they had enough support from other civil society institutions that were being funded by USAID and state and NED at the time, that they would then activate what they called smart mobs. They would switch the algorithms. They would switch the algorithms, and they would selectively target news distribution of messages to users on the basis of their political proclivities, in order to get them to take to the streets in violent street protests and overthrow their government. Basically the same, pull off the same thing that happened in the Arab Spring, but do it in Cuba. And all they needed was enough people on the user base. That was what they.
Can I just pause again and just remind people that I think if most Americans had been aware that this was going on in 2020, the Black Lives Matter protest would have been instantly recognizable as a government-sponsored revolution, co-revolution against Donald Trump, because that's what it was.
Well, I want to come back to, because there's actually a lot there that is, I think will be even more impactful after just kind of finishing this one point on USAID here, which is that, because you mentioned if Americans had known this is going on. Well, what was really interesting about the scandal is nobody knew that USAID was doing this.
It used to be only crazy people thought they were being watched all the time, surveilled, the guy mumbling next to you on the bus. But now anyone who knows what's going on thinks that because it's true. Your phones are listening to you. Tech companies tracking all your online activity in order to profit off of what ought to be private information. Governments are watching too. It's a corrupt system. It's frightening. And the worst part is it's all legal. The government certainly will not help stop this. Of course, the intel agencies love it. So it's up to you to protect yourself. And that's where ExpressVPN comes in. ExpressVPN, which we use here, is an app that sends 100% of your online activity through secure encrypted servers. That means nobody can see what you do online. Not internet service providers, not data brokers, not intel agencies. Don't believe it? Listen to this. Within the last year, ExpressVPN received over 400,000 data requests from tech companies and government agencies, but did not share a single piece of customer data. That's because the company has a strict zero logs policy. ExpressVPN cannot and will not share your data. They don't even have your data to share. ExpressVPN is easy to use, takes one click. It's rated #1 by the experts at CNET and The Verge. And right now, you get an extra 3 months for free when you use a special link. Go to expressvpn.com/Tucker and get that extra months for free. It's expressvpn.com/Tucker.
This was clearly CIA-style covert action. You know, the construction of a private sector for-profit social media company that gets its funds from nonprofit humanitarian relief funds earmarked for a country 13,000 miles away, and all with the express stated interest of doing diplomatic, work with extreme diplomatic implications, overthrowing the government of a foreign country. And so as this scandal all broke open, the media and what had happened is Senate oversight had been completely blocked from any information about this operation. And this is what you heard Senator Joni Ernst tell Elon Musk earlier this week when she was explaining how she was totally blocked by USAID. It was a total black box. It's all in-house. It's all subject to the Inspector General there. And if the Inspector General says no, the Senate gets nothing and there's nothing they can do. And it's less accountable in many respects than the CIA, because the CIA, when they do covert action, they have to get a presidential finding. This is part of the reforms that were done, in the 1970s when it looked like, okay, the CIA was going rogue. And so every CIA covert action has to be formally authorized by the President of the United States. But what happens if the president doesn't want to approve something? Well, and you still want the deed done. What if, for example, you belong to a certain wing of the foreign policy establishment that's at odds with the president, and the president's not going to approve it? So how can you get that done? Like, say, for the funding of ISIS groups, for example. Trump wanted to crush ISIS. Hillary Clinton and Jake Sullivan said ISIS is on our side in Syria. The Biden administration kicked billions of dollars in the aggregate to ISIS, and al-Qaeda groups just are now the sitting government of Syria. And in fact, right now, the current head of the government in Syria, Mohammed al-Jalani, there was a $10 million bounty on his head as being a al-Qaeda terrorist. That tweet is still live on the U.S. Embassy in Syria
from 2017. But he's now our friend.
Right. But if Trump wouldn't authorize the CIA covertly running funds to ISIS, but that cell within the CIA still wanted to do it, all they need to do is walk on over to their friends at USAID, and USAID can do it without a presidential finding. All it takes is creative structuring. They can just do it through humanitarian, relief funds to a certain, part of the, certain region that has a, disproportionate amount of ISIS-K in it. They can fund, the educational institutions.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.